real quick, just to make sure I know them. Okay, so I know them by their code names. There's the Hauler,
Yeah.
Pop,
The Crawler, Pop Star, and
okay, so
luckily we are
I
starting
know them by their
right
code
now.
names. There's the Hauler, Pop,
Yeah. The Crawler, Pop Star, and luckily. And as you can see here, welcome everyone to another episode of Manga Maniacs.
Hi everybody.
And joining me as always is Jeffrey. How you doing tonight, Jeffrey?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. I'm ready to talk about half of a pretty good manga. How about you, Tony?
I'm ready to power through this so I can go back to napping.
Okay, so we start here with the spoiler-free review. My thoughts on the series are more sectioned based on like chapters. Unlike other manga, I believe that this manga. So unlike other manga, I believe that this story really feels like it can be sectioned off, and each of those sections will get their own different rating. So why don't we start with you? Your spoiler-free review, maybe with talk about the basic premise, who this appeals to, and what your personal score of it is.
Well, to start things off, this is a prequel manga not written by the original writer of My Hero Academia. It's set in the world, but before Deku and the other characters became our focus. Our protagonist is Koichi, I believe is his name.
One of the things I love the most about manga of this style is that you don't have to remember superhero manga. Basically, is that you don't have to remember the Japanese names, which I am absolutely terrible at. Each of the characters has their own different code names. So our main character here, the Hauler,
Crawler.
he's a pretty rad guy.
He is the Crawler.
And, yeah. So you're saying our main character, the Hauler.
The Crawler.
Yeah.
Why do
So
you want to annoy a very tired man, Jeffrey?
that's the joke. That's the running joke in the series. Everybody calls him the Hauler.
Yeah, they also call him the... They name him after a pastry, too. It's kind of hilarious. Not the point.
Yeah.
So, we actually have a protagonist in the series that actually starts off with a quirk. And his quirk is called Slip and Slide, where he actually creates sort of like air bubbles to help him glide around on the ground.
The way I see it is like in a video game, if you move slowly enough, the characters won't transition into a walking animation, but they'll still slide along the ground. That's kind of what his power is. It kind of like just feels like he just slides on things. That's why he's called the Hauler.
Crawler. And he ends up becoming a vigilante with Pop Step, which her quirk is essentially just leaping.
Yep.
Just jumping very high. And the quirkless Knuckle Duster.
Yeah, so we follow the adventures of these three going around beating up street-level villains until the series transitions to focus more on the major heroes. But that's a bit of ahead of ourselves. So that's the premise. Spoiler-free, what did you think of the series, Tony?
Well, initially, I enjoyed the prequel style. And the fact that it's not from the original author of My Hero Academia, which presents a different side, but still feels a part of the world of My Hero. And it's very rare and very entertaining to actually have an author that's very different from the original author, but still share the same feel of the world. It can just give the implication that Horikoshi gave a bunch of notes for this author to follow.
Would you say that this series is still like? Would you say it still has an appeal to people who haven't read My Hero Academia?
I definitely agree. I can definitely say that it can appeal to non-fans of the series or people trying to get into it, seeing this as, oh, this is a prequel, or this is an interesting little side story. Let's see how this goes. But keep in mind, it may not be like My Hero, but it's still very serviceable. I give it at least a solid 3.5 out of 5.
So once again, my scores will end up different from yours, just on the merit that mine is how worth your time is this. So I personally section this series into 3 different sections, basically. The first is up to chapter 11, wherein the series is very fast paced and it's very generous with giving world building. And I think that that's really cool. But that stops at chapter 11. Chapter 11, everything slows down and it focuses more on personal relationships and building up a small cadre of characters to a climactic chapter in chapter 26, which would be the second arc, which would be like the second arc, I guess, yeah, section. And then you finally have everything after 26. So personally, I would give the first section up to chapter 11 a 4 out of 5. It's really good, fast-paced, very interesting characters, and a pretty solid art style. And up to chapter 26, the second section gets a 3 out of 5 for me, just because it slows down. If you're not already invested in the characters, you probably want to stop after chapter 11. Everything after chapter 26, 0 out of 5. It's complete trash. I don't even believe that this is worth printing. They should have stopped at chapter 6 and chapter 26. So that's both of our spoiler-free reviews. We can now, hopefully, safely delve into exactly why we feel each particular way about the series. So you gave it a 3.5 out of 5. What would you say its strengths and then its weaknesses are? Because your review was overall more positive than mine.
I would have to say it would be in our protagonists, our main trio. They have very fun and diverse personalities, their interpersonal relationships,
Plenty,
especially Knuckle Duster with the first arc villain of Queen Bee. I thought that was very interesting, and the fact that he was quirkless, and he's essentially this world's Batman, trying his best to free his daughter from a mind control quirk. I thought that was very satisfying. And I liked the introduction of all the My Hero staple characters. I thought that the police chief and his relationship with his younger sister, who is kind of like a Lois Lane-like character. I love all these interpersonal relationships with the characters. But the one thing I cannot stand, but I think that's what it's meant to be, is just one character I cannot stand. That is Captain Celebrity.
Captain Celebrity. Yeah, I disagree.
I cannot stand this big douche of a character.
Yeah, they're trying to.
The sad thing is, he's an American hero that came to Japan, and it makes me cringe every time he says stupid shit.
Yeah,
this is a man who has been put through so many lawsuits and frequently cheats on his wife. And this is how American heroes are viewed in this world. Then I'm severely disappointed in my own country for making heroes.
No. It's not how American heroes are viewed. He's just an American. There are plenty of U.S. soldiers in Japan right now who are acting just as bad as Captain Celebrity, but that doesn't mean Japan thinks of America as
I just hate that this is one of the only representatives of American superheroes in this world, and it has to be this douche. As a child of someone in the service, I would never talk bad about our men and women in service. Never. But what I will say is that the utter ridiculousness of this character just really, really annoys me. And it's sad that he is supposed to be a representation of, well, sad to say, even though this is one of my favorite characters in comics, but this is kind of the Superman archetype, but taken to a completely a direction that really is the polar opposite of the core ideals of what makes Superman Superman.
Like if you had just given his powers to like some random celebrity.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't like Captain Celebrity a whole lot, but I get what they're trying to do. They kind of just brush all of his bad traits under the rug at one point, and now they're just trying to do like, oh, he's so cool. This is him. He's gonna retire soon. 2 weeks from retirement. They're gonna kill him. He's dead. He's got 2 more chapters at most, and that depends on how long they stretch out the big climactic battle that's coming out.
All things considered, another aspect that I really like, more or less, are that the villains that are introduced in this story can be very one and done villains, except for the 2 major arc villains. Queen Bee, I thought, was a great arc villain because she had a connection to Knuckle Duster.
I really liked her design. She had a very strong presence.
Yeah, even though she is Knuckle Duster's daughter being possessed by a Queen Bee quirk, I thought it was very interesting. But when you involve Stain in a more vigilante sense, sometimes that's where it gets kind of muddled. And that the reason why he doesn't have a nose is because he cut his own nose off.
Yeah, so the reason I section them off into sections is because it feels like every one of them has a different villain. The first one is Stain from My Hero Academia. He pops up and is all like, "Hey guys, I'm killing villains," but you know, I'm just gonna have a complete heel change and now start killing villains. I honestly think that Stain was handled very poorly.
Yeah, it may have been implied that he may have started as a vigilante in the main series trying to get rid of the grime and filth, but then he had this realization that the modern hero system is to blame.
Yeah, but that sounds cooler than what actually happened. What happens is he gets punched by a quirkless dude who's all like, you suck because you wear a mask. And then he says to himself, but all heroes are truly wearing masks. And then he decides to start killing heroes.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it's way better in your head. Like, they should not have.
Seeing it in person is kind of lackluster.
Yeah.
It's not as satisfying, even though the fight between him and Knuckle Duster was actually a very enjoyable fight.
Yeah, like that's why I suggested stopping after chapter 11, because if you stop after that point, you get all of these really good fights without slowing down, essentially. The series feels like it's sprinting till chapter 11, and then it slides on the ground and slows down, and then it just makes a brisk walk to chapter 26. But yeah, so
the next villain is what they're trying to imply is the protege of a hero called the Clock, who is a speedster.
Oh, no, the next villain would be Queen Bee here. I get that you're going through all the list, but if you go directly from Stain, you get to fight with Queen Bee, and then they introduce
yeah, that's what I already talked about Queen Bee.
Right, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And the protege of O'Clock seems very interesting, that due to his past with his master, he has a very warped ideal of what a hero is and decides to go to the path of being a villain. And he is probably one of the stronger villains in this series.
Honestly, it just wasn't that interesting for me because we've already seen speedsters in popular culture. We've seen really good interpretations of them with the Flash and Quicksilver. He's not bringing anything new to the table.
But here's the thing. My Hero has actually an interesting way of going about speedsters initially is with the Ida's family.
Yeah, with Ingenium.
Yep, Ingenium. Well, both Ingeniums, actually. And we also get a lot more personality from Tinya's older brother, because he's on this story, too.
That's right. But before we go into all the My Hero Academia characters who make cameos or appearances in this thing, we should probably first talk about our main characters now that we've gone over the villains.
Yeah, and I think since this is still an ongoing manga, there's a lot of room to grow. Maybe we can get a more interesting villain out of the protege here.
The Flash, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't really want to call him that. You know,
I mean, he's super obviously the Flash.
I mean, O'Clock does look like he has a lot of Flash designs with a very stupid helmet.
Yeah. And then the time slows down and I punch or shoot and whatnot everybody. That's just straight at the Quicksilver scene. Come on. I know that he likes Western comics, but like you got to come up with some more creative ideas than that. You get like the crawler. I mean, sorry, the hauler, because I got to commit to
Crawler.
that joke. Um, so our main character, yeah, the crawler can slide on things. His personality is that he's a dope. I don't like the main character. He's the dopiest guy. He doesn't change. He doesn't evolve. He doesn't particularly have any wants aside from, hey, I like to help people, and also I'm a dope.
And admittedly, I like the fact that he's a dope.
Yeah, but at some point you realize that he's been gargling that dope flavored mouthwash every day for the past several years, and you just think, God, dude, you can be smart sometimes. You can make rational decisions. You can be intelligent at least once, ever.
Although it's really funny to have his mom gobsmack him in the back of the head when she came by to visit him in one of the chapters.
I also really dislike how his powers, they aren't consistent. He has the most interesting power of the bunch, but his rule set is never firmly, concretely established, and he keeps breaking the rules that they do establish. It's like, oh, I need 3 points of contact, except I can double jump and fly. Oh, but and then he's got all these powers that he's going to pop out of nowhere and just sort of make up on the spot. And then it's going to cut back to the mom being like, oh yeah, I abused him as a child, so he stopped doing that. By the way, great idea from the author to take this is related to My Hero Academia, which has a very serious arc relating to parental abuse, and then make a parental abuse joke with your main character. That's a great idea. That's not going to be way out of place at all. That's not going to feel like a huge tonal disconnect. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm not a fan of our main character here. He just sort of pulls powers out of nowhere, and
At least they
personality
tried
just
to.
sucks.
At least they tried to explain a lot of the things he can within the different panels of him actually trying to practice certain techniques.
Yeah, but that sort of falls apart when you consider that this guy, like, at one point, he's being tutored by Ingenium. He's all like, oh man, I wish I could stop. That's a serious limitation of my power that I can't slow down. And he's like, why don't you just try accelerating in the other direction? And he's like, wow, this problem I've had for my entire life is suddenly instantly solved. I'm not kidding. That's pretty much spot on for the dialogue.
You know what? You're probably right, but I still kind of liked him for his dopey personality, even though a lot of things were pulled out of thin air when
Yeah,
it comes to him pulling shenaniganery.
I definitely can see why. At the very least, his personality, even though it doesn't change, it has a decent starting point. So you don't really hate him at any point because he doesn't change. He's no Deku, that's for sure.
Yeah, and he's somewhat relatable as a character.
To some extent. Like,
Like I said,
it just sort of
some,
feels like he's going with the flow. He doesn't feel like he's making any decisions over the plot. He just rolls with Knuckle Duster's plan to be a vigilante. He just goes with he just continues doing that after Knuckle Duster has stopped because why not? He works with the heroes because the heroes intervene and then start helping him out. He only uses these powers when somebody else pressures him to do so, or he's in a situation wherein the author just has to make it happen. I wish he had more agency. Deku reached out and grabbed his fate. He really felt like He really felt like he was in control, whereas the crawler is just sort of going along with the road. So,
well, I think that's the inherent difference between the two characters.
yeah. So next character here we've got Popstar or Popstep.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she's a tsundere. That's her personality. She's sassy at the start, But then after chapter 11, she drops the sass, and so she really has nothing to do but stand on a building watching the action and then sometimes talk. I feel like she isn't really a good fit for this series, because even when she is on screen, she's taking away focus from the vigilante stuff to think about like singing and whatnot. They have a whole idol group show that climaxes with chapter 26, and I was just sitting there like, I don't care. Why do I want to watch an idol show? I want to watch. I'm reading Vigilantes, My Hero Academia. I don't care about her singing. And then her plot is resolved with chapter 26 when she finally makes it as a real idol. So, what does she really have to do for the next 21 chapters? Just continue trying to sing? She can't be sassy anymore because it's confirmed that she loves the main character. She's just sort of empty space at this point. What did you think about Pop? I like her design. Her design is fantastic.
Yeah, her design is actually very good. And the fact that she's a tsundere doesn't bother me because I actually like tsundere characters. But I would have to agree that her relevance, so to say, in the story is kind of tapers off in the early most chapters, where her focus is primarily on becoming an idol slash vigilante, which has been her goal all along, and then the whole troop, even though they're a fun cast of quirky characters, I found them superfluous in the greater scheme of things.
They were so superfluous, they didn't even get quirks. I have a lot to say about that later, because the world building in this series is definitely my biggest problem with it. But now we move on to my personal favorite character, Knuckle Duster.
Yeah, I actually really like Knuckle Duster as a character. He's actually this. I love the fact that he's this world's Batman. He's basically All Might with no quirk. It's amazing.
He definitely carries the entire series. Like, straight up, he's the reason that the series is called Vigilantes, because he's the one that turns them into vigilantes. He's the one that trains the main character to take things seriously. He's the reason they enter into conflict with most of these villains. He's the one that explains the overarching plot of the first 26 chapters. He is
the one character that has a personal connection to the first Dark villain.
Yeah, he's the only character with any kind of connection to the villains of the series. Yeah, he definitely is the strongest suit. However, I would argue that post chapter 26, every single one of our main characters is either superfluous or ruined. And that's the same thing with Knuckle Duster, because after chapter 26, he disappears. He's just gone. And he just completely disappears, and when he comes back, he's a much worse character for it. Because, okay, so you haven't watched it or read it, but in Hunter x Hunter, after this giant 80-chapter arc, or 80-episode arc, they have a phone call with a side character from a main character from a previous arc who bowed out of the story. He answers it. It's a completely different tone. He's wearing a completely different outfit. There are dozens of bodies in the room around him, and he's like crazy bloody-eyed. And you instantly understand that this character has through a lot. This character has changed. They've had their own arc in the meantime. When Knuckle Duster comes back, he fights one guy, and then he talks about what happened, but he only talks about the fight with that one guy. He comes back to his daughter, who is hospitalized and is now motherless, and he confirms that he has not spent any time with her. And then he just leaves immediately, again, to go do vigilante stuff that we don't get to see. I cannot possibly think of a worse way to handle a character.
Very true, and I just really want Knuckle Duster to come back to being the cool vigilante All Might character that he was supposed to be.
Right?
Even though his beard isn't as scraggly as his daughter would imply.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Speaking as someone who knows someone with a scraggly beard, his beard is pretty scraggly.
Very funny.
Who could I be talking about? You take great care of your beard. No one would ever define your beard as scraggly. Sorry, I just had a cough.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, the next major character, aside from Captain Celebrity, is everyone from My Hero Academia.
Oh,
So
we
many
don't want to forget about Makoto.
Oh yeah, Makoto. I feel like the story forgot about her. She pops up every so often to say like, "I'm competent," but then she just disappears.
Although she
Cut
is,
her out of the story, and it wouldn't be all that different, honestly.
and she's related to the police officer that helps out All Might.
Yes, the story has so many connections to My Hero Academia because it takes place in the exact same setting. Um, and so a lot of the characters that make up Vigilante's roster are just My Hero Academia characters. Eraserhead gets dozens of full chapters devoted to him. Midnight gets a couple chapters devoted to her. Fat Gum gets a couple chapters devoted to
Which
him.
I really appreciate they gave Fat Gum a few chapters to actually do things.
I wish he didn't have to also be partnered with Crab Lady.
Yeah.
Her whole gimmick is that she makes a angry face and snips things. I don't get it. And Fat Gum doesn't get any time to actually develop his personality. He's just there. Honestly, that's the thing with all of them. They don't get a chance to develop their personality. Eraserhead starts and ends the series and ends up in the current position in the series exactly the same. He's got one personality trait. I'm totally 100% way past done with this. That's all he gets. He doesn't get the chance to show any of the compassion he was showing in My Hero Academia. He's just there, trying, and like it feels like the author is directing attention towards the heroes. It's no longer really about the vigilantes anymore. They're putting the focus on the heroes because the author must know by now that the vigilante main characters cannot hold this story together.
Although the one thing with the one story with Midnight was actually pretty damn funny.
It was funny, but I felt like that the author didn't really understand how this world should work. But that's a story for a later time. Yeah, I do like how they handle Midnight in this story. One thing I absolutely love is alternate costumes, wherein it feels like an actual good alternate design for a character. It makes them feel like they have much more personality and personal scope depth. Seeing Midnight in her casual office-ish attire is really cool. I really like it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And seeing the other heroes actually doing funny things. Yeah, for some
Well, you'll
reason.
have to refresh my memory on that. I don't remember anybody at Midnight getting all that much time to getting all
Well,
that
Chris and
time.
Mike was yeah, Mike was in there.
Yeah, he was, but he was just there. He didn't. I don't think he really did anything funny. He just appeared and was like, "I'm here. I'm commentating about this thing," and now
Oh,
I'm.
and then Eraserhead having I just like basically chilling out at a well, it looks like a
Convenience store warehouse.
yep, where he basically orders coffee, and one of the characters, the Hata brothers, says, "What are we, baristas?"
It's funny because that's all they actually do.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
think that
anything they've
all
done
that
aside
is
from
very
Baristas.
entertaining and hilarious. And it's just when it comes to Eraserhead, it's the characters around him basically reacting to his deadpan nature.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that he has no personal growth, but he's still the strongest character currently in the series, just because of how much personality and design, and just because of how much personality comes over from My Hero Academia and how strong his design is. I I
Mm-hmm.
kind of dislike that his quirk is useless though. Not one single time does it stop somebody from activating their quirk.
Well, it only comes to quirks that he, well, he can't stop mutation quirks.
Right, but I mean, they keep bringing it up every time he gets into a fight, and every single time it fails. Every one. Every single time it fails. He's a
You
zero
know what?
percent
You're
success rate
right.
with that quirk.
Now that I think about it, you're right.
0%. It had near 100 in Macadamia until Nomu came up. And this one, it's a 0. We never get to see him do anything involving his quirk. He doesn't even stop Crawler from crawling. It's like, what the heck?
Which, that's sad. Because that's a quirk you could easily stop.
But yeah, they after chapter 26, they really swerve and just start focusing on these heroes because the main characters have nothing left to do. All of their arcs have been resolved. The most interesting one that was driving the story is just gone. The two remaining just have nothing to do. They start focusing on the macadamia teachers, and they don't really have anything to do. They're like investigating cases and whatnot, but the art isn't nearly as good as it is in macadamia, so it can't really survive as a combat-focused shonen series. I don't think Vigilantes has much longer to go. I think it's probably going to get canceled at some point, even though macadamia is still really popular.
Yeah, and it's very sad to say because I actually like this prequel to My Hero, but eventually some things must come to an end, and the inevitability of this ending, hopefully on its own terms.
Preferably, yeah. I would hate if it was just stopped on a cliffhanger, but not particularly because I once again just recommend that everybody stop at chapter 26. The series does, so why not? So there's one last thing I wanted to go over was the world building in this series. This is some of the laziest, the worst world building I've ever seen in any series. And I watched that Netflix Bright show. Like, good God, is this terrible? They don't even think about what a society with superpowers would be like. This is just Japan, but with some characters that have superpowers. No non-hero character is ever defined as anything special because of their power. Like in Macadamia, you'll have a throwaway line like, "Hey, you have an electrical generation quirk. You would be great in a power plant." There's none of that. None of even those throwaway lines. They introduce around, I want to say, 16 characters in Pop's troupe, and none of them have quirks. They have a mixer in a world where people can control other people's minds. Who would go to a mixer with strangers in a world where people with mind control powers exist? Why isn't this world changed for having superpowers? Why is everything normal? Why is there still regular freaking architecture, even though some people are 17 feet tall mantis people? All the quirks, aside from the crawlers that show up that don't belong to established characters, are incredibly boring. One guy just has long eyeballs. Long eyeballs! Takes the drug that superpowers his quirk and he just has long eyeballs. It's so disappointing to me that they could just have a character show up who can read minds that would completely change the impact of the series, but they just don't. None of these, like, all these random civilians in these scenes, you can just assume that they don't have quirks because they don't matter. Knuckle Duster is a quirkless guy, but even he has more of an impact with his lack of quirk than so many other characters who appear. It's just so sad, you know? Well, the worship superpowers, but freaking nobody acts like they have any. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And in a way, let's compare that to the world building that the main series does.
World building in the main series is fantastic. The world building in the main series, like, it feels like you're only seeing a snippet of this whole world when you see the school. But here, you're actually seeing it zoomed out. You're seeing all these other areas, and just nothing is different. It's all the same.
I think that's what they're trying to imply, that even though it's a world with superpowers, some things will always remain consistent and constant.
That's so boring, and it doesn't make sense because of things like the mixer. Would you go to a mixer in a world where people have mind control powers? Would you put yourself almost alone in a room with strangers?
I mean, it would be very terrifying, but that's no different to what a lot of the things that happen in the dating scene.
I don't know, man. You look at freaking One Punch Man, and it treats superpowers, even though not everybody has them, with a lot more weight. You have entire organizations that feel like they have an organizational merit. They have structure. Cities have differences compared to just real world. Entire cities are structured differently. But here, it's just modern day Japan. Just Regular, average people. Regular old idol shows. Nobody but Pop thinks to use their quirks to enhance the show. It's just regular world. And that's so boring. Even flippin' Marvel Comics does it better. And only like 1% of the people in the Marvel setting have superpowers. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I most certainly do know that. As someone who reads superhero comics quite a bit. But when you have worlds that basically have, well, people with superpowers, you kind of have to, like you mentioned, you have to make certain concessions with those who may have those powers. But if you also look at the way Marvel and DC handle their shared universes, all these different superheroes do have actual normal lives set in this real world setting. And sure, a lot of their powers influence the world around them, but there's still a lot of consistent things. Like people still go on dates, people still go grocery shopping, people live their lives. And I think that's what they were trying to imply here in Vigilantes.
But that's not how the setting is designed. People have superpower. People can blow up like bombs. Someone like Todoroki could kill a stadium full of people like that. And yet the whole world is just the same. It's just that there are some villains and some heroes. Except other than that, it's just a regular world. There's no golden age as a result of people with superpowers being developed. Bring in somebody with the power to like use their own eyes as a microscope. Cool powers like that just don't exist in the general populace, and it's so disappointing.
Well, I wouldn't say that they don't exist. They're not probably showcased enough. Okay, let me explain it to you like this. Imagine if our world suddenly, like a good portion of our population in the United States of America, had gained superpowers due to some random cosmic coincidence.
Yes, I predict a complete societal collapse, and then following that, an incredibly long dark age of society essentially reverting to a tribalistic or war-banding society before eventually a completely new one is formed based around individuals having superpowers.
Now, I would respectfully disagree with you on this. Picture it like this. We have prior knowledge of how heroes and villains are supposed to act due to all of our entertainment. Now, if we give regular people these abilities, I wouldn't say society would have a collapse. I would think that, like you mentioned earlier, most people would actually go forth and do things that are connected to their abilities to further their own goals and ambitions. Yeah.
One bank robber and give him Todoroki's power to like nuke and destroy an entire stadium. Take one bank robber and give him the power to split an atom. Take one random terrorist and give him 13's power to be a black hole.
Very true. But you can also say that you give one police officer, say, the powers of All Might.
Let's say every single person in the entire world had a rocket launcher strapped to their arm, including babies and teenagers going through very angsty phases. The police having those rocket launchers is not going to stop mass chaos, especially when you have several impoverished countries. Look at the flippin' revolutions in like Syria. How would those go if every single person in the world had superpowers, or 80% or 90%?
So now, if you were to, since you presented this, would you say that the world of My Hero Academia, coincidentally, is flawed?
World of My Hero Academia, the timeline is flawed. It feels like it's 2 months after a superpower is starting to be developed. It feels like 10% of the population has superpowers, and it's been 2 months since they started appearing. That is where society is, because it's just modern society and some people have superpowers. There's no change, like there's no super crazy advancements in science going on. There isn't even that much of a cultural difference. It's just Japan, but with more of a superhero flair and with occasionally some monster pops out. You could call this a common rider setting, and I would completely believe you.
All right, well, and I think that both Vigilantes in the main series are trying to imply that even though this great event happened within human biology, things inherently will not change.
Just one last example. Let's say you have a person who can read minds, provably and factually. That one person runs for office. Literally every single corrupt person in the country is now at risk of being exposed. Entire infrastructure risks come up. Just one person with that ability would have that level of change and influence. And yet there's none of that. There's still corruption in government offices. There are still people trafficking drugs across the land. There are still just prime ministers, and they're nothing special, and it's just regular people. The people using these powers for good haven't even shown up. Why isn't there like incredible improvements in like daily life from people with crazy science-based powers? Just one person pops up and they're like, "Oh, my superpower is that I can understand P versus NP." Boom, society's changed.
I'm not sure what to tell you here.
It's just sort of disappointing because like they aren't thinking through the ramifications of their actions. They aren't thinking through the ramifications of having Stain appear this early. They aren't thinking through the ramifications of having Deku's mom in her like late middle-aged self appearing to hang out and appearing to thank the crawler. They aren't thinking about the implications of all these things that they're doing. Why is there a giant sky egg in the middle of Japan when people have superpowers that could knock it over incredibly easily? One villain with super strength could just tackle it, and it all falls out. It just doesn't make any sense, and that's overall why I give the series its mixed rating, because after chapter 26 they stop focusing on the characters that are interesting, and they just start focusing on other characters, so they desperately try to get the world to feel larger, and the whole thing just completely falls apart. You could erase all these latest chapters from existence, and I don't feel like it would be a particularly damning thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can at least agree with you there.
So that's my overall thoughts on the series. Do you have anything left to add?
No.
All right. So next episode, we will be talking about the rise of the Pokemon version 2 hero.
Yep, they're racing the Shield Hero.
Yes, indeed. I hope you'll join us then.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to vanish now. Watch this. Goodbye. This is terrible here. This is so unprofessional. Watch this. Boom. I'm vanished. I'm invisible.